I'm really, really excited to welcome the first top-notch expert. He's called Vibhas Ratanjee, and he's a senior practice expert for organizational and leadership development at Gallup. He finds that Southeast Asia is a complex place to do business, and years ago he started exploring how companies could find local talents that would be able to one day become successful leaders. Now, I'm really curious to learn more about your approach. Welcome to the US, Vibhas Ratanjee.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the kind introduction. It really is an honor to speak at this forum. I wanted to perhaps add a little bit to that introduction. I'm based in the US today. I've had extensive experience in Asia and Southeast Asia, from Delhi to living in Bangkok. That was my first expat assignment, to 10 years in Singapore. But working across all of ASEAN, to now Los Angeles, California, where we have many places that resemble downtown Seoul or Tokyo or Kuala Lumpur. But my main body of work has been on leadership development, and I've noticed a massive gap, a massive deficit in leadership talent in Asia and in Southeast Asia in particular. So I'll spend some time sharing with you a leadership study we conducted in Southeast Asia, research that was published by the Harvard Business Review, and some of my own musings, having worked with senior leaders across the region. So let's start with some data points there first. And these data points you see up here really highlight this deficit that I'm talking about. So only 41% of Asian high net worth individuals, according to this research, have a succession plan in place. Let's remember that more than half of Southeast Asia's largest companies and nearly all of its conglomerates, both private and listed, are family controlled, whether it's the SM Group in the Philippines or Charon Pokphand in Thailand or Sinarmas in Indonesia. This is important because family-driven organizations make a bulk of the business in Southeast Asia. And 85% of Asian leaders, according to this other study, don't feel they're future ready. In fact, in a separate Asian leadership study that Gallup did, when he asked many leaders, very senior leaders, how they became leaders, most of them, in their own admission, said it was purely by accident. And therefore, it's critical in Asia and in Southeast Asia to have more intentional focus on leadership development than the accidental leadership we see quite often. So I'll talk through some of these strategies in our research when we talk to 72 of very successful leaders in Southeast Asia, what they told us. But let's share a little bit more data to give this into perspective. And this is very recent data. Gallup knows that a powerful indicator of leadership performance is employee engagement, or let's say the percent of employees who are engaged at work. And these are our latest numbers. So globally, that number is only 20%. So only 20% of employees are engaged. That number is 23% for Southeast Asia. Now you'll see on the right-hand side, there's some notable variations. The Philippines tends to have higher engagement. Generally, we've been trending this data for quite some time. Singapore, Malaysia regularly show lower employee engagement. And I think this variation is important because it perhaps underscores the unique challenges that leaders in each country face, or rather the degree of individualization that regional or corporate leaders must keep in mind. So I think that is an important element. At the end of the day, employee engagement, the accountability is leaders. And we need to start right there. But let's characterize leadership development and the challenges of leadership development in Southeast Asia a little bit. I talked about those low numbers on employee engagement. Add to that the complexity of Southeast Asia, the social, the cultural, and the behavioral differences that each country's distinct ethnicities and religions and languages pose. And I really strongly believe that leaders who can manage this multifaceted diversity will be able to create value for their companies and definitely for the entire region. Now, COVID has added another layer of complexity here. But leaders in our study talked about how complexity gives rise to opportunity. That's really important. So they used creative, flexible approaches to open up new possibilities, developing new ways of doing business, or tapping into latent market potential. Now, one word that does get thrown around a lot is a global mindset and global competence. But global competence does not mean Western best practices alone. It means that practices that leaders can maximize by understanding the inherent nature of each country in Southeast Asia, the innate opportunities, the unique challenges that each market presents to leaders. So let me talk a little bit about this research, and I'll talk about kind of the key themes from this research that we think are really important for leaders and organizations in Southeast Asia as they develop a strong pipeline and a bench of future leaders. A little bit about our research itself. So I did mention about 72 C-suite leaders, senior executives in 6 key countries in Southeast Asia. These were deep, hour-long conversations about their leadership experience. And we didn't just want to speak to Asian leaders, and this is important. We spoke also to expats. Our goal was not to compare and contrast Asian leadership and Western leadership, a collective mindset versus an individualistic mindset, and all of that. Rather, what we really wanted to do was understand leadership practices that make leaders more successful in this region, including expat leaders. So irrespective of their background or ethnicity, we wanted to understand what it takes to be successful in such a complex and dynamic environment. Now, there are a lot of themes that emerged, but there's some that emerged repeatedly in our interviews with these highly successful ASEAN leaders. And they suggested kind of 5 leadership development strategies that should be the core to developing leaders in, like I said, a highly complex melting pot that is Southeast Asia. So I'm going to, for the rest of my time, kind of take you through some of those and perhaps talk about the implications on leadership development in general. Let's start with the first one, and I'll take you through each of these 5. The first one was making long-term career plans, but remaining open to possibilities. The most leaders we interviewed said that early in their career, they established this long-term vision of what they wanted to achieve. But again, given, like I mentioned before, Southeast Asia's chaotic business climate, even the best laid career plans can go awry. Many said that a linear career path is not effective in this ever-changing and complex environment that we find ourselves in. Many we spoke to actually said they rebooted their careers as they moved to different countries within the region. Well, a well-thought-through career plan in Singapore would need to be completely reimagined in Cambodia, for instance. So how often should one re-examine their careers? And there's a magic number that came up, and that number was 3. So every 3 years, these leaders were almost doing a reboot of their career. They were reflecting on their career. They're reflecting on their experiences, those crucible moments that make them leaders. There's a lot of introspection. They did deep introspection and reflection at that 3-year mark. And I really feel that organizations should also play their part in helping leaders move out of their current roles and place them where they can grow themselves and help grow the company and the region as well. A leading bank in Singapore, the CEO, when we spoke to them, they said they have this thing called a 2+2 program that enables employees who've been in a job for 2 years to apply for a new assignment elsewhere, even in a different location within ASEAN or in India or in China. And if the fit is good, their supervisor must release them within 2 years. That's why they call it the 2+2. That is such a great, smart way of managing talent when you think about the opportunities that Southeast Asia represents, especially regional organizations, can really maximize a tool like this. So these are shifts that happen. You kind of look at it in a long-term perspective, but the leadership development and career planning in Southeast Asia is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So giving yourself enough time to reflect is one thing that really came through. And these shifts and moves also require that companies, of course, help leaders align professional goals with their personal life as well. So that was the first one. The second one was interesting. A second strategy, if you may, was go global early. And it's virtually impossible to conduct business in Southeast Asia without crossing national or language borders. So and within a 1-hour flight, as you all know, you could be in a country absolutely culturally different from where you started off. So the executives we interviewed emphasized that early international assignments played a large role in their success. And they advised companies to send leaders abroad at different stages of their career to equip them with that global competence, global mindset, and global perspective. And I must say, these don't just mean cushy expat assignments where you get to know very little about the culture of the country. It really is about embracing the culture, immersing yourself in that culture, practicing language, customs, networking with locals, instead of seeking out these expat enclaves with similar background expats as well. But there's one caveat. These postings are not for everyone. You need to really find the right fit. You need to find leaders who are willing, indeed passionate about getting to know new cultures. So when it comes to the diversity of Southeast Asia, there's a lot to learn, of course, much to absorb. So you can't be what I call a parachute expat and expect to fly in and fly out. You really need to gain that cultural understanding of a particular country and so on. Having spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia and having worked with clients across, I can really vouch for this one. Having worked with leaders who've been through different countries and managed different countries, the first question I usually ask them is, what did you learn? And the response with great leaders is usually, I learned a lot about who I am, for one, and how I can best adapt to different locations, different cultures and languages and so on. So that was the second one, go global early. Here's the third one, which is kind of gain some early cross-functional experiences and risks because they pay off. The executives we talked to said that leaders need more of a holistic understanding of how a company operates beyond the narrow borders of their expertise. So companies should ensure that emerging leaders kind of gain that working knowledge of different aspects of business, of different visions and functions and departments and locations. And really, this is an opportunity for them to test their strengths in each area. The leaders we spoke to said they were exposed to these diverse expectations early in their careers. In many ways, that really helped them find what they're passionate about. A lot of leaders told us that because they were able to align their job and what they were given with their natural strengths and talents. And that's where we need leaders to feel empowered and not afraid to take risks. And that's very important, to kind of go outside your comfort zone. In general, there is a general aversion to risk in many ASEAN cultures, in fact, many Asian cultures. In fact, the Hokkien word kiasu in Singapore and Malaysia, which means kind of fear of losing or fear of missing out, kind of typifies this behavior. So allowing high potential leaders to try diverse roles, activities, and take risks, even to fail, will accelerate their learning and help improve their mettle. In fact, one of the things when we asked questions to these leaders and said, where did you learn the most? A lot of these ASEAN leaders said, from failure. I learned the most from failure. Those early risks pay off in the long term. As I said, these leaders test their mettle and understand this region in its entirety and its depth. Here's the fourth one, developing a professional network and relationships with depth. And you've probably heard this a lot. In Asia, relationships are deeply valued, which also means that developing trusting relationships can be challenging if you don't put real effort into it. So professional networks are vital for career paths in the ASEAN region. Really, we're getting together and getting to know other people outside work can be more important than meetings in the office, especially in this virtual environment. It's very important that there are great relationships. And companies in ASEAN can do a lot there. They could really help emerging leaders cultivate these authentic networks within the organizations and also outside the organizations. But I must say, networking is something that usually gets a bad rap. It's kind of the gin and tonic brigade, if you may. But in Southeast Asia, networking is essential. So these leaders we talked about how they formed deep and authentic, meaningful relationships. And importantly, that gave them a better view of the larger ASEAN, Southeast Asian macro, political, social environment that their company operates in. So when you think about specifically new executives, they can spend a lot of time carefully investing in meaningful professional connections, rather than superficially casting a wide net. So it's not about how many connections you have on LinkedIn, but how many authentic relationships you've developed over time that you can rely on, that can support you. Now, this is kind of the fourth one, an important one, but let me talk about kind of the fifth one, which was really interesting. We were kind of a little surprised when we discovered this fifth kind of strategy. And this is about, well, actually no need to save face. That was the final strategy. And you probably heard this in many cross-cultural sensitivity training programs, that Asians always want to save face to salvage their dignity in humbling situations. Now, this is interesting because a lot of the leaders we spoke to disagreed with this. They maintained that showing vulnerability was actually instrumental to their success. You're not kind of the hero leader who has all the answers to all questions. and which is interesting from a Southeast Asian perspective, and I've written quite a bit about this. The cult of personality is dominant in Southeast Asia. Specifically, when you think about political leaders, let's say in Indonesia or in the Philippines or in other countries as well in Southeast Asia, that's the dominant way. It's control and command. But a lot of these leaders we spoke to, as I said, disagreed with that. They talked about showing vulnerability. They actually said that showing vulnerability was instrumental to their success. And companies in Southeast Asia and Asia generally must encourage this kind of brand of authenticity, because that's built on transparency and objectivity. Now, there's a lot of obviously great advantages to applying this kind of leadership principles, because when you show vulnerability, you foster innovation. It's very interesting when I talk to leaders in Asia, a lot of them said, sure, I'm vulnerable. My door is always open. I have an open door policy. And I always ask them this question, you have an open door policy, but do you have an open mind policy? And that's what you need. You need an open door and an open mind. But really, Southeast Asian countries can do a lot to kind of create this culture that allows leaders and their employees to fail, and then to admit to fail without fearing harsh consequences, allowing employees to challenge dogmas and strategies. That makes the leader more flexible, especially in uncertain times like we've seen with COVID-19, and it really does encourage innovation. So this is a very quick overview of these 5 strategies we think are really important that can really push leaders into more intentional development. Now, I want to mention something in terms of strategy we've seen a lot of companies use, especially in Southeast Asia, and that is a focus on what we call key experiences. Now, you've all heard about the 70-20-10, where it's 70% experiential. When you think about those 70% experiential parts in a leadership development plan, when I ask a lot of organizations what they do around that 70%, the answer to that is usually, well, some kind of job rotation, some kind of activity, or some kind of course even. But these are the experiences that truly matter. So providing these experiences in a very intentional way, understanding these crucible moments that have shaped your leaders is critical in Southeast Asia, in Asia, and around the world, but particularly Southeast Asia, because like I said, Southeast Asia is a region that's rife with opportunity. Now, again, if you'd like to learn more, these are the 5 strategies we've talked about. There's a lot more in a report. And the report does offer some crucial insights for developing next generation of the ASEAN leaders. If you want to know more, do connect with Gallup, review some of our latest research on our webpage. There's a lot of articles we write on global leadership, global mindset, and Asian leadership. So would also love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter to continue the dialogue. Thank you very much for the time, and maybe we have some time for questions.